Welcome to the MasterYourMix podcast, helping engineers, producers, and artists create professional recordings and mixes, even from home. I'm your host, Mike and Davina. Let's get started. Hey, welcome to the MasterYourMix podcast. My name is Mike and Davina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today, my guest is Björgvin Benediktsson. If you're not familiar with Björgvin, he is an audio engineer, musician, entrepreneur, author, educator. The guy does a whole bunch of stuff. He runs audioissues.com as well. And Björgvin's just an all-around good dude. And in this chat, we get into a lot of talk about building your career and what that looks like, how to build an audience and keep people following the music that you make, and how to keep top of mind by repurposing content as well. We also get into some really good stuff about work-life balance and how to maintain that balance and what that looks like, how to create efficiencies in your schedule and in your process and a whole bunch of other stuff so that you can actually live a well-balanced life in this industry. Because let's face it, this industry can be tough at sometimes. It can be very demanding, but you need to set yourself up in a way that you're going to get the life that you ultimately want and not be feeling like the industry is like just wearing you down and just like, turning into something that you don't want to be a part of. There are definitely ways that you can have a successful career in this industry and live a well-balanced lifestyle. So in this interview, we get into a lot of different ways that Björgvin's done that for himself and different ways that you can do it for yourself as well. So with that said, let's just jump right into today's episode. Björgvin Benediktsson, thanks so much for being on the MasterYourMix podcast. What's going on, man?
Hey, how are you doing? Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Excited to chat.
Yeah, man.
Good to see you.
Me too. For people who might not be familiar with you, can you give us your background on who you are, what you do, and all the awesome things you're up to?
Yeah, how much time you have?
I know, man. You're an entrepreneur to the max, from what I know.
Yeah, so my name is Björgvin Benediktsson. I'm originally from Iceland, but I have lived in the U.S. since 2009, 2010 or so. I've been an audio engineer since 2006 when I sort of got the bug. I got a workshop in live sound at a live venue, and they showed me the mixer and how it all plugged in. I was in a band at that time, so I actually, knew about audio equipment, but I had never actually used it myself because the keyboard player at the time was the audio person in the band, and I was just like the cool lead guitarist that had no interest in learning about any of that. But I got a workshop, I did a workshop, and then I was thrown into the work, actually, and it seemed like the workshop was actually a ploy to see who was qualified or hungry enough to learn it so that the engineer giving the workshop could actually just go and not do that job anymore because he didn't want to. So I inherited his job, or I got a job at that venue, so which was a good nice little random happenstance for sure. And so I did a live sound, was in bands in my teens, and went to audio engineering school in Spain, in Madrid, where I was for a year or so, year and a half. And I met a girl there and moved to the U.S. to follow her, not in a creepy stalkery way.
Mutually, yeah.
It was all consensual. She wanted me around. She still wants me around, and we have a 2-year-old now. And we're married, and then that's a whole other story. But I created Audio Issues as a school project in the SAE Institute in Madrid, Spain, as a sort of way. I started writing and blogging about audio, and I was a staff writer for Audiotuts, which is an Envato. If you're familiar with the Envato marketplaces, where you can get all sorts of graphics, and Audio Jungle is a royalty-free audio marketplace, things like that. So I was a staff writer for their tutorial site for a while, and I was learning about audio and paying forward and writing about what I was learning on a blog back in the stone age of the internet in 2009, 2010, or 2009 actually. That's where it actually started. But and from there, I started Audio Issues as sort of a website. It was called audio-production-tips.com, which is super SEO optimized, but a terrible brand name. And So I basically like to say that I started writing about audio and what was learning and what I thought was useful and what might be helpful to other people that were maybe not as far along as me. And I never stopped.
That's amazing.
The topics have changed mildly over the years. They're very much still music production, mixing, mastering, is sort of the audio engineering side of the equation, sort of like a lot of like EQ, compression, reverb, delay, saturation. Those are sort of like the main plugins that I talk about, the main processors that I talk about. But also because I've built this brand, this business, and I've created all these products, launched books, written books, and, kind of accidentally became an authority in this industry in a very small niche. I do not portray myself to be the know-it-all in any way. I'm constantly learning at the same time. But because I've learned so much about growing the brand, the business, and stuff like that, I started talking a little bit more about music marketing or marketing and online marketing and sort of writing and storytelling and advertising and sort of growing a fan base or growing an audience. I don't have the quote-unquote fan base that a traditional musician might have. I have an audience of, home studio musicians, bedroom producers, people like that. But there's very little difference in how you build an audience. You just build it. There's just different people and different sort of topics that you talk about.
Absolutely. Like there's definitely a lot of crossover with that stuff.
Yeah. And so the last thing I did sort of before or like during COVID and right at the same time that my daughter was born was I wrote a book about sort of music marketing, music business that I was always interested in and always thought they were very helpful, these sort of business parables, which are stories, sort of novelized fictional stories, but with a business purpose, or they were designed to teach you something. Great examples are the Richest Man in Babylon, The Go-Getter, Built to Sell. These are all they're sort of books that I modeled my book after. So I wrote sort of a business and marketing parable for the music producer that I published in 2020, at the end of the world, during the end of the world. And that one's called You Get What You Give, a simple story for finding success in the music business. And that's sort of, it's a little bit about me in, audio, in the audio industry in general. Basically just mostly a teacher these days. I've done, been a professional musician. I've toured a little bit. I've been in tons of bands, recorded, mixed, and mastered as a freelancer, things of that nature. So I've broadcast recording engineer, sort of like bands recording straight onto radio, which is a whole sort of controlled chaos situation, which is really fun. You have to be really, really confident in what you are doing because there is no undo button. So, I take all of those different learning experiences and I hopefully create some content that people are interested in consuming and knowing more, and hopefully learning something that can help them.
I love it, man. There's a lot to unpack from that. One of the things I'm actually really curious about is that, like, you're a very prolific writer. Like, I find that you have like thousands of articles all over the internet, and I'm curious to know, like, were you always a writer? Or, like, was that like before you got into music, or like where did that part of it come in for you?
Yeah, well, I've written, like I said, I started writing and I never stopped. And the most annoying thing about writing so much is when I Google something that I want to know, I often find my own articles and it's very unhelpful. But I've actually, I guess maybe this is a made up memory because you can't ever be truly sure. But I think that I always wanted to be a writer in some way. And this was probably the way that it manifested itself. Like, it's very easy to write how-to technical stuff because it's like, do this, do that. Here's how this works. Very matter of fact. And I'm also very creative and kind of an artist. I don't know if I really do classify as a true artist, but I got kind of bored with the technical how-to. So I started injecting more sort of memoiristic tendencies, telling stories from my life that have, maybe have some point to it that my audience can have a takeaway and learn something from. And then, You Get What You Give was sort of the culmination of that creativity. Like, oh, can I write almost a novel in a way that is still valuable for a specific audience?
Yeah.
Isn't just entertainment.
I love that. Yeah, I was always curious about that because I was like, man, how does he write so much stuff? Like, I write so many emails just like for my stuff, but I'm always like, I'm like, how does he do it? Does he have a team of people that are writing for him, or what's up?
Right. Well, I mean, to be fair, I do have a team, but I don't. But their tasks are more related to repurposing the writing that I've already done.
Gotcha.
So like I'll write the stuff and then they will either put it into a carousel post on Instagram or something along those lines.
For sure.
So repurposing and recycling and making sure that the one piece of content you make can be seen everywhere is super important.
Yeah. And I think that kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier about the idea of building an audience, and like whether you're a musician or you're a blogger or whatever, it's like this concept is still the same. It's like you want to repurpose stuff. You want to be in people's faces as much as you can. And you have to be creative with that and figure out these ways of repurposing. So I love that. I think that's a good thing for people to hear because people always ask me like, how do I promote my music? And it's like, There's so many ways. You just like, you have one song that you can turn so many different ideas out of, right?
Totally. So, and it comes down to storytelling. So like you say like, oh, I have this, I have music. How do I market it? Well, tell the stories. How many stories are there in the song? Well, there's hopefully at least one, which is what the song is supposed to be about, right? So you at least have one piece of content there that you can repurpose to all the social medias that you want to be seen on. But then, why did you write that song? What is there any sort of behind the scenes stories as you were writing it that was a challenge that might be interesting for people to learn more about? I think it's probably easier to be a musician and sort of the closer in the artist camp than the sort of creative entrepreneur camp, because your stories don't have to be valuable in sort of a technical sense in that way. Like I feel like I have to make a point that they can go and maybe apply to their own music or productions or careers. If you're an artist, you can just say whatever you want. You can just talk about the music because they're interested in you, not necessarily what you can do for them, which is when you're an entrepreneur, creative entrepreneur, creating content that is useful, they care more about what you can do for them than they care about you, as a person, I guess. as sad as that is to say, artists have a leg up in that regard because, like, how many artists have you that you probably love a bunch of musicians, and there's probably a time in your life where you were just consumed with knowing everything that you could about that person. You wanted to know, you wanted to know their like pre-show ritual or something like that, or something, and you've just found it interesting because their music was interesting, and therefore they were inherently interesting as well.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome to hear, and I agree with you 100%. I think it's like musicians get so caught up in like the song is the product, and it's not the product. Like it's one element of it, but like you said, the story behind it can be expanded to so many different avenues, and that's the stuff that keeps you in front of people's faces. And I've always said to people, like, this isn't the music industry, this is the entertainment industry. And if you're an artist, you need to learn to be entertaining. And sometimes that means telling your story and, making some sort of funny video or whatever it takes to like get that story out there. So, the more people can step outside of the box and stop thinking kind of in these like old school music industry ways, the faster I think people are going to build their audiences and grow.
Right. And I think that there's something to be said about, being entertaining, and that you don't need to necessarily think of entertainment as just making people laugh and everybody's having a good time.
Totally, yeah.
Like the entertainment industry is also tells sad stories and and movies about challenges that have been overcome are more likely to get nominated for an Academy Award, of course. So like that's the sort of stuff that you want to think about too. It's not necessarily, you don't always have to show your happy side.
Yeah, it's more of like in some ways I guess maybe you could say it's a connection industry more than like an entertainment industry, as in like, that typical funny kind of way, right?
Right. Totally.
So yeah, I mean, if you're connecting with people, then that's what this is all about. I think that's why we as listeners, we gravitate towards certain songs because we're like, oh, that song speaks to me. That's an experience that I've had and I relate to it. So, when you find those artists, then you're like, oh, this person gets me, so you want to learn more about those people at that time, because then like, it's like maybe someone tapping into some feelings or emotions or thoughts that you've never been able to express yourself.
We can make it sort of like an audio nerdy sort of thing and talk about like, well, it has to resonate with you. You make stuff that resonates with other people and they can relate to you. And if you don't tell those stories, they don't know how to relate to you, and they never will. But if you do tell those stories, or you try to like share more, then there is going to be a certain percentage of people that your stories will resonate with, and they will relate to you, and then hopefully maybe follow you and become your fan, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is a really good topic for people because, like I said, like I have people asking me all the time, like, what do I need to do to like get people to pay attention to my music or, break into the industry? And
right.
Yeah, the more you can like multi-purpose your stuff, it's an easier way rather than like feeling like you need to write a gazillion songs just to stay up in people's faces that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things can be content in and of themselves. Like you write the song, but then the YouTube videos or the stories behind the song that are either the reels, the YouTube videos, all these different things, they're all content that is entertaining in its own right. So it's not just the song that's the product. It's all this other stuff that can get you fans and things like that. And if you have points to come across that are inherently valuable, maybe the YouTube videos will get more views than maybe the song will get streams,
Totally. Of course. 100% agree with all of that. And one thing, I think this is probably a good chance to segue into your book, because obviously your book has to do with finding success in the music business. So before we get into kind of the premise of the book, I'd love to know, like, what does success look like to you then as an artist or as someone breaking into this industry?
That's such a good question, man. That is the question for all questions, really. Like, because I both know and don't know at the same time. Because it's like, well, I think inherently success means freedom and being able to do what you want and being happy with what you have, but still wanting to challenge yourself and like, grow. And it's funny, like one of the last things I talk about in the book is finding success and defining success for you and what that means to you, because it's going to be different for anybody or everybody, right? Some people are happy with very little, and some people can't ever seem to get enough. And depending on where you are in your career, obviously you might be hungrier than other people, right? I, for instance, am probably not as hungry and ambitious as I used to be in my early 20s, right? I'm definitely more established. I'm more comfortable. I have created something that I can build on. But when you are starting out, your definition of success is probably where, I mean, you can think of it like, when have you arrived? Right? And you're the only person that can decide that for you. Mm-hmm. And it's at the same time, it's very hard to decide that because all these external social factors are influencing your decision and telling you that, no, in fact, you have to get back out in the rat race and do more and grow. And because what you have now is not the success that you should have, because look at all these Instagram accounts that seem to have more success than you, right? And so to me, success is being able to take my daughter to daycare and, pick her up without worrying about a boss breathing down my neck. I haven't had a job in 15, 20 years probably by now, but that's like a true job with a boss. So like I'm completely unhireable in that sort of sense. But having the freedom to work on what you want when you want it, but still having a goal of what you're trying to achieve, who you're trying to serve, and being realistic and pragmatic with the fact that you do require money in order to sustain the lifestyle that you have, right?
Yeah.
So like but that combination of factors is different for everybody, right? The single person that's an intern at a studio that can stay up until 2 a.m. recording indie bands that person's definition of success is different because they're on a different path than I am. I would hate that life. I would not want that life. I did variations of that, getting up at 5 a.m. to like build giant rigs for big concerts and stuff like that. So I've certainly had my fair share of like the long hours and low pay. But those were stepping stones towards what I thought success was going to be, which also changes depending on, where you go, because, you think that this is going to be it. And then now you're going to make it, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And once you've gotten to that point where you thought you were going to be good, you actually find that there's some other things that you may want to do. Right.
Yeah.
That's why I talked about this with my insider members. We had a goal setting class just on Monday. And I talked about how, thinking about, what your definition of success is, what the goals are that you should kind of put that relate to that level of success that you want. And then what are all the tasks that are required in order for you to reach those goals. And at that point, and need to know when the goal is reached, because you need to know when you're supposed to like stop and reflect and sort of either double down or decide it's not worth it, because that's also, these stepping stones may not always lead to where you want them to go. And so when you're at the goal and you think you've reached the goal, that's also the time to decide, is this where I'm going? Is this the right place? And if so, and that's the sort of thing that you want to do. Let's take, for example, just like writing, recording, and releasing a song, right? That is a process that's sort of cyclical, or it has a beginning and an end. But the career of writing, recording, and releasing a song is cyclical, right? Mm-hmm. So one song is a to Z, right? But the career of songs or producing music as a career is a cyclical thing. So once you've reached that goal once, you should make it a habit and systemize it so that becomes the thing that you do and your identity. Because, how you describe yourself says a lot about who you are and what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're bang on where it's like, as you grow, your goalposts for what success is like will definitely change. And right. as a dad myself now, like I get it. Like I don't think I got it for the longest time, and now I'm here at this stage, and it's like, okay, I need to be like home for my family. I need to be like present, and not be like some deadbeat dad that's like just all about my music, and I'm just playing gigs all the time, or like working late all the time and whatever, ignoring my family. So I get that changes. Whereas like when I was 20, I didn't sleep. It was like
right.
that was like that's how I made my imprint on the industry, I guess, and got my foot in the door, right? So that's always going to change, and I think that it is good to look ahead at like where you want to ultimately go with it, and just make sure that the steps that you're taking in the current day are the things that are actually contributing to that happening. right? Because like you could just take opportunities just because they're an opportunity, and sometimes that isn't the thing that you need to actually get closer to your goal. It can take you further away, right?
Right. And you will find, and I've this has happened to me numerous times, is that once you decide that you want to achieve something and you know that that goal is where you want to go, don't be surprised that all these other opportunities come out of the woodwork.
So true.
And like, you know, want your time, and they all look like good opportunities, but they are just short-term excuses that take you away from where you want to be. Not to say that you shouldn't take the opportunities if you like them or whatnot, but you find that the universe works in a weird way that when you think you're focused on something, the universe will focus on giving you all these distractions.
Yeah. Well, it's that saying, like when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to another. And so, you know, if that no is to where you actually want to go with your goals, then yeah, you're shooting yourself in the foot there. Some obviously some opportunities are, you know, you just take them because they're fun and they're not really going to make a big effect in your life, but other things will, right? So you definitely have to be constantly like evaluating where you're at versus where you want to go. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about this book. Obviously, you mentioned that's like a parable, kind of in the style of like the Go-Giver and that kind of thing. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about it. What's in there?
Yeah, so it is. It tells the story of Casey. He wants to be a music producer, but he's just working in a dead-end job in the IT department of some marketing firm. Not going anywhere, doesn't really love his day-to-day, but his day-to-day gives him the money to buy all this gear that he loves music and loves audio, and he has a really cool home studio, but because he has to basically say goodbye to his dream of working in the studio every day that he goes to work, it sort of weighs on him, and he really actually wants to figure out how to make music his full-time thing. And through some, you know, inciting incidents, because you have to put an inciting incident in a book, otherwise nothing happens and nobody wants to read it. He rage quits his job and just decides that I can't stand this job anymore. I'm going to leave and I'm going to just figure this thing out, right? And then after a sort of a disastrous beginning and sort of like real low-paying, terrible clients that take advantage of him, that, you know, and he's just kind of left holding, he's left having done a bunch of work with nothing to show for it. He's, you know, down on his luck, which is where, you know, you want the hero of the journey to sort of hit rock bottom and then something's supposed to happen. So what happens there is that he meets a mentor. And so this is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the story that comes in, and he is a music producer, or sort of a music producer coach, sort of mentor that has had some success in the industry and in business in general. And he takes him under his wing and teaches him the success skills that he needs to start and build and grow his studio business. So throughout, you know, I think it's the timeline of the book is a few weeks. They meet, you know, every week for lunch, because, you know, every good conversation happens over good food. And so they're hanging out, eating lunch every chapter of the book, talking about music and talking about, you know, the mindset you need to succeed, to find quality clients, the habits that you need to adopt in order to be, you know, be the successful person that you want to become, understanding your customer, understanding who your clients are, and figuring out the strategies behind sort of like diversified income streams, pricing structure, how to price yourself, and ultimately defining your own success and what that means for Casey in this regard. But, you know, obviously for the reader, hopefully that will give them some idea of what they want to do next, right?
Are you sure you didn't write this book like 15 years ago and move to Canada and follow me? Because, like, I swear this is my story. Even down to the lunch.
Right. And so, I know that it's relatable because you're not the only one that has a similar story like that, and it has, and there are so many similarities between you and me, and my students and your students and what they want to achieve, and so I thought it'd be fun to see if I could write something entertaining that people could be inspired and motivated by.
I love it. Yeah, I do think that, it is obviously that hero's journey that you're talking about in the book, but like we all experience that to some degree in our own careers, and maybe it isn't like verbatim the way you described it, but like, we all go through a lot of those similar ups and downs and kind of starts and stops and stuff like that with our careers, especially when you're trying to make a go of it, being on your own and that kind of thing. There's a lot to learn, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes and all that. But I love that that's the concept of the book. I'd love to talk about like, what are some of the common mistakes that you typically see people making when they're trying to get into the industry? Like, what are some of those typical things that people kind of shoot themselves in the foot with that maybe are slowing them down?
Yeah, I think maybe moving too fast, or like basically like, asking people to marry you too fast, basically like wanting to work together immediately instead of trying to like start a relationship or understanding each other or whatnot, or trying to sell too soon.
Yep. What about like the rage quitting thing? Like, because obviously that's part of your story, right? And like, I've been there, man, and I failed horribly when I rage quit. So, I think to me that's part of it. But I'm sure lots of other people are making those things too.
Yeah, I think that you should maybe be more pragmatic about it than just jumping into the deep end, because you don't really know if you can swim yet, and especially if you don't have a track record and just have a desire, you need to. I hate using the term "pay your dues" because who are you paying?
Yeah,
but you have to have something to show in order to be taken somewhat seriously in that regard. Like, so like you don't necessarily want to quit a job that you have, but maybe you can do something on the side. Maybe you can start something on the side, and then once you've built that side business, that side startup, side studio, if you will, you have the ability to say no to your job at that point because you've created something that's financially feasible and on strong footing, instead of just the leap of faith. Because as much as we want to romanticize the leap of faith, it doesn't always work.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that you brought up a good point there of like, sometimes you have that desire to do something, but it's not necessarily a clear strategy. And
right.
And that's, I think, where a lot of people get caught up. It's like so many people have jobs where, they've got like they're bitter to like their boss or whatever. And they're like, oh, I can do a better job than that person. And it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe in some aspects you can, but there's a lot more than just like sometimes the one task that really well. It's,
right.
There's a business behind all of that, right?
Right. And that's also the thing that, like, because in our industry these days, you kind of have to do everything. There are still big studios and you can get an internship and maybe become a staff engineer somewhere, but that's very restricted to certain metropolitan areas and certain geographic areas in that regard. So like, that's just not viable to somebody who's in, a less populated state or somewhere that it doesn't have a music hub. But that doesn't mean that they can't excel at their craft online.
Totally.
But at that point, you have to know not just your craft and your art. You have to know the marketing and business side of getting people to find you and having the soft skills. You need the hard marketing and business skills, but you also need the soft skills of relationship building and being, adding value, whatever that means, providing value to people in that regard. Whether that and that can mean working for free in order to start a portfolio, or that could be creating content that hopefully people see. That's what I did. I I always wanted to be like the engineer, and I was a live sound engineer, and then I did a lot of like engineering in all different types of things, mostly sort of recording bands, not producing music in the studio in the modern way in that regard, but a lot of the sort of engineering side of things. And so, like, what I was doing was I was just creating this content as a way to teach, and then I just became the teacher as opposed to the person that people come to in order to get their songs mixed. Because, like, I usually turn people down when they ask if I can mix their song. I usually refer them to my students that I know want the gigs more than I do. Because I just have too many things on my plate because I'm too focused on on all of the other part. Daniel Grimmett, I don't know if you know him. He runs this business called Dark Label Music, and he's a music producer, business consultant in a way. We're friends, and he talks about this a lot in his YouTube videos, how like the diversified income streams and how you sort of build your career. You have to start with like the experience and then the relationships, and then you can sort of build the authority in that regard. I was lucky in that maybe I built the authority online because online was early. Back in those days, there was like only a handful of audio blogs, and now even the biggest Grammy Award-winning engineers have their own courses, right? So I think I can't remember where we were going with this, but I think that when you're starting out, like you have to have the skill that they want you to use if you want to do the job right.
Yeah.
Like I would never bid for a job to produce an EDM hit or whatever because I'm simply not qualified for that. Could I mix the song? Probably. But could I master the song? Definitely. Could I create a online presence and help them with all of their online marketing? Absolutely. Because like that's where my skill set is. And in this industry and in all industries, especially because there are so many things available online and out there, and everybody has their personal brand, and everybody is a life coach and offering these things, and that you have to be not necessarily super specialized, but have to be good at a few things that you can put together in order to be exceptionally unique at that thing. Right?
It's a differentiating factor when you know those kind of things.
Right. Like it's easier to be the only person than just being good, but good or great at something, but you're in a sea of a bunch of other people that do the same thing.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, there's a million great audio engineers out there.
Oh, they're all better than me.
But most of them don't know a thing about marketing or how to promote or whatever. So it's like the engineer who's maybe like pretty good and can get good results, but who knows how to like promote the stuff that their artists are working on and like actually help those people grow. Like those are the people that are going to have more success in it, I think. I think it's the reason why, a lot of people will like look at other artists that maybe they don't like their music. And, I'll give an example of like, people would say like, oh, Justin Bieber, he's crap or whatever. And it's like, whether you like his music or not, that kid knew how to work his ass off and market himself and hustle. So like, that's why he's successful. It's because he diversified his skills and like figured that out and like made it happen because of that. Right.
Totally.
So, yeah. It's the same thing. Like you just want to always have those extra skills to be able to push further or help the people that you work with push further as well. So yeah, it really helps differentiate you for sure. Well, I know that like, some people are going to listen to this and think like, well, I don't really know. Maybe I don't have those skills. And I think that there's sometimes going to be that feeling of imposter syndrome where it's like, I'm not good enough at this. And so, or maybe that engineer who maybe does have those other skills, but it's like very self-conscious about their engineering side of things. Like, they're not going to push themselves as an engineer. Like there's lots of different things, different ways that imposter syndrome can come in. So what are some of your tips for overcoming that? Because I know that's something you do talk about in your book a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a chapter in the book where it's basically all about imposter syndrome. and I sort of personify imposter syndrome as just like the person that's trying to get you to not do the things that you know you should do. And when you start doing the things and you start making progress on the things that you want to do, they will find you new shiny objects that you should focus on now, and therefore you end up never finishing anything, right? Imposter syndrome is a tricky subject because I think most people have it, except the sociopaths. And it is both helpful and very destructive because you kind of can listen to basically do everything that the imposter syndrome tells you not to do. That's probably the thing that's more likely to get you success, because like there's because it's fear, right? Like imposter syndrome is fear. It's in the way because you're afraid of what might come, because this isn't probably not talked about enough. And it's that sometimes you're also afraid of what the success might bring. Like, what if I succeed? What then? What do I have to do then? I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Totally.
That might be something that people, those are sort of the limiting beliefs that you might have when you're trying to succeed, whatever that means, in your own way. And imposter syndrome is trying to keep you from that, but they are also trying to show you that, well, it's super cozy right here. Why should we leave? Like, well, just chill, man. Like, aren't you happy with this? Right? Who are you to do this? Like, there's plenty of other people out there that are doing that. You don't have to think about that. You don't have to focus on that. Just let them do it. Or what other things are there? Like, it's like, yeah, there's the comparison syndrome. Like, oh, you're never gonna do it at the level of this person, disregarding the fact that person started at 0 too. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the like, who are you to do this? And it's like, well, why not me? Why not you? Like, whose permission are you waiting for here? Like, nobody's telling you you shouldn't be doing this. And also, nobody has the right to tell you that you shouldn't do this, assuming, of course, that what you are doing is legal, ethical, and moral in every way. And because, like, if it's creativity and art and you believe in it, why not do it? Like, you're only hurting yourself by limiting yourself in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love how you just like flip the script on it, It's like when you start to feel that feeling of like, oh, I can't do this, like, well, ask yourself a different question. Like, what if? Like, you know, that's it's good stuff.
Yeah, I find I meditate a lot, and I started meditating more now that I've flipped my routine a little bit better in the last couple months. But what I've found that when you meditate, you sort of are able to observe your thoughts a little bit better, and you're able to deflect the negative self-talk a lot by just having a conversation with yourself, not on the street corner loud though, just do it personally. But when you talk to yourself and when you can observe your thoughts, you can actually start asking yourself, like, what is it? Why am I feeling like this right now? What is it that I am dealing with that is making me feel that way? What am I afraid of here? And you can start being like a little analytical about your like psyche, I guess, which I think is helpful because you can sort of psychoanalyze yourself a little bit.
Could be dangerous, but
yeah, even though you're probably not qualified to do so, but you being able to have a conversation with yourself where you know that you can be your own worst enemy is helpful, because you need, like, once you're aware that the person that's holding you back the most is yourself, you are able to play chess with your inner shadow or whatever imposter syndrome, Giannis, whatever we want to call him. because it's obviously a him. No woman would do this to.
Women are too sweet.
Yeah. And once you are aware of the enemy within, if you want, if you will, then you're able to play a better game.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, and I think you brought up a really good point there too of like fear of success, because that is a real thing, and it can be very crippling, and it can be very easy to just be like, oh, I'm kind of comfortable where I'm at right now, and sometimes when you're looking ahead and you're thinking like 10 steps ahead of yourself, you're just like, you're creating problems that aren't problems right now. They might not ever be a problem, but because you perceive that they could potentially be, you're like, I don't want to deal with that right now, so I'm going to just stay where I'm at. And it's equally as crippling as, just fear of failure too.
Right, because it's like you can make up the future in your mind in like a heartbeat, but it's all made up. And none of it is secure. And if the future you make up in your mind is negative, and that's the future you hold, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the future you get, because that's the future you focus on. But if you are aware that maybe the future I imagined is made up, you can actually have a better conversation and construct a better mindset towards the future and where you want to go instead.
Absolutely. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I love that. That's great. Well, one other area, like one topic that I wanted to talk to you about was the idea of work-life balance. And obviously, like, we've talked about how when you're younger, you might have more energy, your goals might be different, so you're going to like hustle your ass off and that kind of thing. And as you get older, obviously things can change. And you and I are both dads, so I'm a new dad, so I've got lots of lessons to learn from you there. But like it can be an adjustment to just like catch yourself being like, oh, I need to like change my lifestyle to like actually live a different way than I maybe used to. So how do you go about managing that work-life balance? Like how do you, like, do you have systems in place for that, or what's that look like for you?
Yes. So a few different things is one thing that I realize is that it obviously changes you completely in every way, but what you think is important also very much changes, because you're not just doing this for yourself anymore. You're doing this for somebody else, and it prioritizes, maybe in a bad way, the fact that you need to provide. So you want to be thinking of that. So like, even though an opportunity is good, if it is just like a free fun thing, but it just doesn't fit, that's not something that I would take on anymore. Like, I wouldn't do free work anymore. I haven't done free. Well, I do free work every once in a while, but like, I pick my projects and I pick my offers, and I just prioritize people that are serious, and really try to focus on what is actually going to move the needle for my family, more so than just like, oh, this could be fun, because like, if I'm spending time on this, I might not be able to be there for Lilia when she, whatever, right? So that's one thing, is like, I reprioritize the importance of things and who and what tasks are important, right? And you become actually kind of maybe a better business person and an entrepreneur in that regard, because you stop dealing with people's bullshit, and you just start ignoring people that aren't serious, and you start understanding that like, oh, these people will never become clients or customers, so they don't actually matter as much as I thought they might, right? Because like, I have to take care of myself and my family first. I can't be doing free stuff, free content, free this, that, and the other thing, just because they expect it, because they are not that important to me anymore.
Yeah.
Another thing is just, having a structure for your partner, and making sure that like you delegate the tasks well enough. Like my role is pretty defined, And like there are certain things that I always do. Like I always pick her up. I always drop her off unless I'm not available, which is not very often, right?
Yeah.
So those are the jobs. And so like I always do the lunch, and I make the food, and I make sure that, she's picked up, and all these sorts of things. So, and that actually helps build a routine, because like she has to go to daycare and she has to be picked up from daycare. So that sort of structures your day, or that caps your day in a certain way. Like you can't just like forget yourself in the studio because it's like, oh, it's 5. She expects me to come pick her up, and I'm going to, obviously. So that sort of like creates these limitations that you have to work within, which is sort of a good thing, because it means that, all right, in this span of time, I want to achieve these things. Which things are actually important? Going back to like, well, what are the actual important things that move the needle for the business and our, my professional life and our like future in a way. And you pick those things. So that's definitely, having I wouldn't necessarily call them systems as much as it is just awareness.
Yeah, it's almost like just like scheduling your life a little bit more, having that kind of routine helps you just keep a little bit more clear-headed about it.
Yeah. And because we both work, me and my wife, we have her in daycare like full time every day or every weekday. And she, she learns more in daycare than we could ever teach her. So that's good. And so we just have those, we still have a full work day to do stuff. And so we just become more productive due to forced productivity in a way.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah. And I think like people listening to this who don't have kids, it's like, this still applies. It's like, if you schedule your life and you like prioritize things, like it's still the same. It's just like when you have kids, you have no choice but to be a little more on top of that, I guess. It like forces you into it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, like one thing that I definitely know a lot of people feel about this industry is that it's kind of notorious for having like long days and working late nights and all that kind of stuff. And I think that there are a lot of people who get into it young. And so it's like, when you have the time, you can obviously do it. But there becomes that point where you're like, can I maintain this? And I think that's like, there's like a tipping point in the industry where like people either choose to stay with it or they're out because like the industry just like outgrows them or something like that, or the other way around. So like, what's your advice for people who are looking to get into the industry but still have a balanced lifestyle? Because sometimes it does require you to have that kind of chaotic, late night, hard, hustle mentality early on.
Yeah, I think this industry in particular requires it to a certain extent. Obviously, I think a lot of it comes down to just you deciding what the life you want to design is.
Totally.
But if you want to be recognized and get a big production gigs or a cool job at a big studio in Nashville or something like that, there is a certain ringer you probably have to go through. I don't necessarily have much experience in that world, but if I wanted to be the person they call back home when I was starting out, if I wanted to get the live gigs and get called to, be the monitor mixer, the front of house engineer, or the whatever at the shows, I had to be taking those jobs. I had to be saying yes, and I had to be willing to do the work, right? And so I think you don't have to, the balance doesn't have to be like day to day. It's like, oh, I only work 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever. You can do like, I work like a fucking maniac for 2 weeks, but I need like 5 days off, or whatever. Like, I think there's always this, and I think that this is true in almost everything, is that like after a period of intensity, you need rest to recover. whether you are lifting weights at the gym, training for a marathon, or just like writing your dissertation or working insane hours in the studio, you cannot sustain that forever. And so you need to understand where your particular battery, how your particular battery works, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're running on empty, figure out how to fill it up, right? How to recharge it. I do a lot of different things. I have other businesses. I mentor for a lot of other businesses and do coaching, group coaching a lot with my wife's organization, which helps entrepreneurs in early stage businesses. I'm a venture advisor at the university's entrepreneurship program here in town. So I'm technically a faculty or a teacher. I'm not actually like on payroll, but I am a member of the mentor team for the entrepreneurship program. So like I have a lot of moving plates, right? And so I know that, and I also know that I get bored if I didn't have those plates all the time. But when I need a break, I take a break. And because I have the business and I've designed the lifestyle of sort of freedom, I know that if I need a break, even if it's an afternoon on a Tuesday, I can take that.
Totally.
Except class is actually on afternoons Tuesday, so I couldn't do that. But but like Fridays are usually off, or Fridays are like kind of like not very intense work. It's sort of like I'll do a lot of like easy work or creative work, or like learn or watch a video, or like dabble on make progress on something that isn't like do or be creative with something, play guitar, stuff like that. Mondays usually I start slowly. I always have a big afternoon on Mondays, so I've like knowing myself, I've started creating this routine that works for me.
I love that. Yeah, and that's definitely something I can picture some people listening to this being like, oh, that's easy when you're self-employed. But, if you're not self-employed, obviously that makes it a little bit more challenging. But and I think for people getting into this industry, whether they're just fresh out of college or whatever, it's like sometimes you just have to take those existing industry jobs before you maybe go freelance. Or some people don't even want to go freelance. Some people just want to get that job in the industry. But you still have to find that balance, I think.
Right. And we've talked, like I kind of make it seem like, oh, there's only two jobs. There's live sound and then like an in-house like commercial studio engineer. But obviously there's not. There's so many different audio jobs available. Mm-hmm. And that's not even scratching the surface of the other music industry jobs that are available that aren't necessarily the technical jobs. They can be in, there's marketing agencies that only do music stuff. There's, there are still labels out there. There are publishing companies. There are music tech companies. So if you just want to work in the music industry, there's opportunity. Mm-hmm. You just have to find the job that you want, and start there. It doesn't have to be, a recording engineer or a mixing engineer or a producer. You could maybe do that on the side, or maybe you'll, maybe that's going to be your way in. If you worked at a branding agency and you branded a bunch of big musical acts, like, guess what? Like, now you have that on your resume, and that's a pretty big credibility indicator, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, I think that we talk a lot because we're sort of like in the audio industry, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of our audience is, I think we probably overlap the audience. We have a lot of people that just have their home studios and then like to like dabble and make music and just kind of have fun with it. They may not actually have any interest in a career, right? They just want to be good at the technical stuff, which is great. Yep. But the people that are really want to work in the industry and are still young and want to, have a career, want to be able to look back at 20 years into the future and be like, I really did something cool. It doesn't have to be a recording engineer or producer. It can be, there's so many other jobs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a lot of different areas of this industry you can dabble your feet in, and I agree. Some people listening to this aren't going to want to like have a career in the industry. That's totally cool. And then other people do, and then there's the people who want to be the artists and promote themselves as artists, and then there's the engineers who want to be professional engineers. So it's all over the place. But I think all of this stuff is still relevant no matter what career you're in or what area of the business you're in. It's like you do still need to check with yourself, find your goals, find that work-life balance as best as you can, make sure that you're following the right path and, not falling into some traps that could ruin your life or like create a lifestyle you don't want. Right. I say ruin your life. It's like it's a disastrous thing, but sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just like, you just don't want to do something that you don't want to do.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously another way that like, I think work-life balance can get thrown off sometimes is setting expectations with clients as well, because sometimes like, your clients don't know the work or the work-life balance that you're trying to create for yourself. So it's easy for them to like just assume you're on call and all that kind of stuff. So what are some ways that you manage your client expectations so that they don't think you're on call and they know when to reach out to you, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So because my main clients are basically students is not necessarily the right word, but I'm their mentor or their coach. So like whether we are working on whether I'm helping them with their online presence or I'm mixing a song with them in front of them and I'm teaching them how to do it. That's, a lot of mix coaching, how that works. Mm-hmm. And so I just have specific times on my calendar. I'm available for those things. And if they have questions, I tend to answer them over email within like 24, 48 hours. I don't answer things over the weekend. I don't think I've ever had a real big problem of people wanting to requiring, because we're not in like a high stakes, like I don't have a high stakes client where like things are, life or death if things don't go the right way. And
it's true. I think people think that it's a high stakes thing for themselves more than their clients actually do. Yeah.
And so I've never had a problem with like people being annoyed that I don't get back to them on the weekend, because I just don't. And they're fine with that. I do have, but then also like if people have questions, I have so much material. So like when you become like a coaching student or a client, when that has access to me, I have all these, video materials and programs that are supplemental. So even if they can't get me right then and there on the phone, they can get access to the thing that they wanted to learn from me without me being present, because that's just the nature of the online course program world, where you have coaching materials and coaching calls, right?
Yep.
And so I just, I make myself available an X amount of hours, not every day actually, but a few days a week. And those are just the calls that they book, and that's what they book.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think, whether you're recording bands or whatever, like just at least having those open lines of communication with your clients is always really important, so they know, what the timelines look like and when you're free, and set those expectations early on, and it won't take over your life because of it.
I think it's important to ask questions because you want to be cognizant of their goals and what they're trying to achieve too. Because inherently, if they're hiring you, you should be looking at yourself as a member of their team, and your job is to help them achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve. That relates to you, obviously. And so you also want to make sure that you know exactly what that is and how that looks like and how that fits in what your offer is. So, and be very clear and upfront about what your offer includes and does not include, right? Mm-hmm. So like if you were to mix and master a song, like how many revisions, be upfront about that. If you do unlimited revisions, be clear about how realistic unlimited revisions are, right? And be clear, and also I think be aware of red flags, because like if you see a red flag in the relationship building process and you think that this might be, you might want to work on the music, but the person whose music you're working on seems to be not the best client, you should probably address that head on, as uncomfortable as that might be, or just not take the project and just move on. Sometimes you have to cut your losses too in the middle of a project. There's, I don't know if there's so many groups, and you're probably a part of a lot of Facebook groups, same ones I am, but there's some real interesting like client relationship stories that pop up on, the 6-figure home studio podcast group and all these, and it's always very interesting to see people chime in with their advice.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, that setting that expectation, having those conversations early on really can set the path for the rest of the project and maybe save yourself some work if you find those red flags early on. And, it's worth shooting down a project if it's going to make your life a living hell.
Right. Because you said it earlier, like if you say yes to this, you're saying no to something else. And do you want to be working on a shitty project when the perfect project comes in and you have to say no? I mean, that's a romanticized example, but
you could also look at it as like, there's a bit of a snowball effect to that too. So like, let's say you want to be like a rock engineer, and then a whole bunch of hip hop clients come your way and you're like, okay, I'll take these on because it's like easy money or whatever. And then now you become the hip hop guy, and you're like you're not getting rock clients like you really want, and you're just getting deeper and deeper to this industry you don't want. Like, yeah, right. That's shooting yourself in the foot. So it's like sometimes you just have to know like where things are going and see that writing on the wall there.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, one other thing that I was just thinking about as far as like that work-life balance is that sometimes you just need to create efficiencies in your systems or in your processes as well.
Oh, yeah.
So when it comes to being in the studio, what are some different efficiencies or systems or different ways that you've developed for yourself to help you work faster or smarter and be more efficient overall?
Yeah. If I need to do things more than 2 times, I try to create an automation for it in some way. For instance, if I have to send a lot of the same email to a lot of different clients or a lot of different people, maybe there's like, you personalize the first part of the email, but then there's basically an informational section that's the same. Then I just create that as a template email so that I can shoot out, 10 emails in 20 seconds instead of like writing a new email every time. Mm-hmm. Because you can still personalize, but you don't have to personalize the whole thing. So those sorts of things, like figuring out like, all right, if I'm going to be doing this over and over and over again, is there an automation or a shortcut or something that will help me make it so that, I save some time in just like the moving of the things? For instance, like a mix template is a perfect example of this, right? Like I just have a giant mix template that just has all my plugins that I usually use on the buses that usually get created, not all the time, but they're all there. They're all bypassed. All the sends are already set up.
Yep.
All this sort of stuff is just there. So I just import the tracks, do a rough mix, send it to the template, and then I don't have to like spend, I don't know, like an extra hour or 2, because that adds up, just hunting in the plugin folder.
Totally. Yeah, those are all little things that like, you don't realize when you're in the moment, you don't realize how much time it's actually taking until like, you set aside some time to build that automation. And I was working with one of my coaching students today, and we were talking about building a template, and I was like, okay, let's see how long it takes to build a template. And like, however long that takes you is time that you've saved on your mix. Right. You can look at it that way. right? Time yourself, or even I love what you were saying about emails and like using programs like that. Like I use I don't know if you use Text Expander, but I that's what I use. And they send you an email every week. Here's how much time you saved using these shortcuts. And it's like it blows my mind how much time I would have been typing out emails.
Definitely, and like also, I think not enough people have an ROI mindset of like spending money to free up time, or create convenience. Obviously, you have to have money in order to spend it. So, like, I don't want to be all privileged about it, but there is something to be said about spending 3 hours doing something poorly instead of just paying $30 for somebody else to do it for you, or to buy a service that does it in 30 minutes or something like that.
Totally.
Because like the ROI or the return on effort is just exponential. Like the return is so great. So like if there are tools available and they cost money, they probably don't cost as much money as the time you're saving or the value it brings.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so like I definitely think not enough people think that way. And especially when it comes to tools on the internet, there are so many free trials that you're literally never losing any money by just seeing if it works.
Yeah, it's true.
If you can just get a 7-day trial and see if it works and it saves you a bunch of time and effort, like I think that's probably worth $20 a month.
Absolutely.
If it is something that you use all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's when you just realize that that return on investment, whether it's your time or monetary or whatever it is, when you actually see that return, it puts things into perspective of like how much you can actually continue to invest into it long term. And I 100% agree with you. I think I try not to push a lot of plugins with my clients because like I think we all have enough EQs and compressors and all that kind of stuff. But there are a handful of plugins that I will say, like, having a tool like Vocaline or whatever, that's going to save you hours of time if you're editing vocals a lot. Or, sure. There's a whole bunch of tools like that I think those ones are worth investing into because you're getting your time back with it, Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Björgvin, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I think we covered a lot of great ground here as far as people trying to get into this industry, establish their careers and building their audiences and all that kind of stuff. So I love everything we covered in here, and I'm sure there's plenty more that we can get into. But we'll have to have you back again. If people want to, if people want to learn more about you or follow you online, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just audioissues.com is a good place to start. Audio-issues.com is also available as a domain. I think they all redirect there. I'm on Facebook Audio Issues, Instagram Audio Issues, and I also have a YouTube channel that is actually my goal for this year is to become a better video storyteller and make more videos and better videos that aren't just like, here's another mix tip, but something that's a little more substantial. So you can also check out the YouTube channel there. But the best way to learn the most from me is to sign up to my email list on Audio Issues. And because you'll get a lot of free content and tips and tricks and sort of all the best stuff that I've done throughout the years. So that's probably where they should go. And then obviously the books are available on Amazon. So and actually probably anywhere you get your books, they should be available in like Barnes & Noble and places like that as well. But I usually just refer people to Amazon. So it's step-by-step mixing, or you get what you give on Amazon, or stepbystepmixing.com, or you get what you give book.com too.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely include those in the show notes so people have them.
Thank you.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been great having you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I hope people enjoyed it. I hope they had some takeaways and can take some action to improve their music career, whatever that means to them.
I'm sure they will. Right on, man. So that was my interview with Björgvin Benediktsson, and I thought he shared a ton of great advice about how to get into the industry and how to create a well-balanced lifestyle for yourself and, live a life where your priorities are maintained. Whether that priority is family or your own mental health or any of that kind of stuff, you definitely want to live a life where it's fulfilling. And you sometimes have to set some boundaries on things just to make sure that you maintain that lifestyle. But when you do it, you're going to be a lot more grateful for it. And the people in your life will be grateful for it as well. And with me definitely being a new dad, I'm definitely feeling that pull for sure, where, I need to change around my life a little bit more to have a little bit more of a schedule and, to have a little bit more routine like Björgvin was talking about in this episode. Because I know that once I do that, I'm for sure going to be more efficient with my time. When you only have limited time, you work harder to get things done on time and you find efficiencies in your system. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to implement a lot of the stuff that Björgvin was talking about here. And I definitely think that if you're someone who's feeling like you don't have that work-life balance, if you feel like you're just constantly grinding and not really feeling fulfilled, look inward, and follow some of this advice that Björgvin's talking about here and start to set those boundaries for yourself so that you have that much better balanced lifestyle. So yeah, I'm really excited that we had Björgvin on here. He's such an awesome guy, and he shared a ton of great stuff. So I hope that you found that helpful. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. That way you're notified about all new episodes as they go live each and every Wednesday morning. And also, make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com. That is a website where I help out musicians with creating pro-sounding recordings from their home studios. If you're looking for someone that can help provide you with a step-by-step process for recording, editing, and mixing your music so that you know exactly what to do, what to listen for, how to dial in settings, where to position your microphones, all that kind of stuff, so that you're making your music sound exactly the way you've always wanted to hear it, that is what I can help you with. Make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com because that is where I have a ton of great resources designed to help you throughout that process. Whether you're looking for coaching or courses, or check out my book. It's called The Mixing Mindset. And in that book, I break down the process of mixing step by step. So definitely make sure to check that out. It's all available at MasterYourMix.com. And I would love to help you with getting your music out there and making it sound super exciting and making you feel proud of the music that you're working on. Once again, check that out, MasterYourMix.com. And that is it for this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for sticking around to the very end, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. To have your questions answered, submit your questions to questions@MasterYourMix.com. Please go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. And for more information on how you can improve your mixes, visit MasterYourMix.com.